I was probably one of the first people in the charts, really, to be totally in the box. You know, my first album was completely done in Logic. Well, I mean, they were all really done completely in Logic. And you know, that was kind of like 2001, you know, 2002. So I've kind of done things in the reverse, really. Whereas now you know, it's just more and more, even kind of like top end producers now are kind of starting to see a few people doing that in the box. And I've kind of gone the opposite way, and I've kind of gone completely almost out of the box, because I was I guess I just really like that kind of I've always kind of liked that kind of American kind of R&B hip hop sound, really, and obviously, you know, the first place you'd really look towards is like a K series, you know, but that's really big and very hot, actually. More hot than big, you know. So I kind of I kind of started out when I noticed that companies like Funky Junk were doing cut down G series, and I think once you kind of take that step and go out the box, in order to compete with the clarity of plugins, you know, the kind of the low distortion element side of plugins, you have to kind of go big or not at all, really, you know. So it's been quite accelerated, really. The kind of the expansion into the analog realm, you know, that me and my engineer have made. And I, you know, and it's a reversal of the philosophy, but I think actually that, I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree that the way of working with a console is just a million times faster and more human. To keep ourselves inspired, I guess we all need a bit of change, and I think that, you know, if you're working, you know, if you're working on like an old G series, you know, you've got no, you know, the recall isn't, you know, it isn't the same as a duality. You know, a duality is the same every time, and so, you know, there is a recall, you know, and it does take a few minutes to set the desk up, but you don't have to. I mean, I remember loading up songs, you know, thinking that the snare was wrong, you know, and just this constant reloading of songs and changing stuff and switching between songs and stuff, which does feel liberating when you first get it, you know, or if you had been working with a desk before, but what's more liberating for me is that stuff just sounds right, you know. I mean, I really can mix a track in a day and not want to change it, and that never happened in the box with me. You know, stuff took weeks and weeks to mix in the box because it never quite sounded like it had been mixed on an SSL, you know. I used to find myself in the box kind of going, oh, the kick doesn't sound big enough, the snare doesn't sound big enough, you know. I'm just fiddling loads, whereas I don't fiddle now with anything, you know. You just plug something in, record it, and it just sounds good. With a desk, you can do more than one thing at one time. That's the answer, really, is that in a computer you can only do one thing at a time, and on a desk what you find is that you're doing everything at the same time, you know. Well, on this one 24, but obviously the sky's the limit really if you've you know, if you're a real duality user, you know. But you know, I don't, you know, it's not, I don't do like orchestral stuff, and actually my music is very minimal, so I actually I would certainly never need more than 48, but actually 24 is kind of fine really, you know. And we use all the delay returns as extra summing, you know, which is great. I start my songs in Ableton, so really most of the songwriting is done in that, and I try to get it as far as I can in Ableton. But then there's also a lot of songs that are started on the piano, because I've got the piano wired for sound as well. You know, or in there, you know, on the guitar. So I mean, it'll either start in here, but a lot of the time it will start in Ableton, because you know, I've kind of done the MPC thing with drums, and I still just find, I just don't understand why you can't export audio from an MPC. You know, it's just like, you know, if they could just export the tracks as WAVs, so you could just drop them into your, you know, you have to sync to MIDI and press play, and you know, and all that. So I do all my drums and stuff, I do it in Ableton, because it's just such a fast way of working. To be honest, most stuff now I can track here. I mean, obviously I never do drums here, but you know, piano, Rhodes, synths, bass, guitars, I do here, you know. But we've been in loads of studios. I tend to just book a day in a studio, like you know, one of the Moloko studios, or Toe Rag was a real eye opener as well, because that was again, like you say, tape. You know, you just literally have to learn the song all the way through and play it, you know. That was a real eye opener. You need good musicians, you know, and I'm not one of those really. I tend to, I'm a kind of Pro Tools musician really, you know. So you know, all the pianos, I do a lot of piano stuff, and you know, we do bass stuff. But yeah, when we were in Toe Rag, actually, we were with my band, so that was great. You know, they're just really on the ball. But it involved quite a lot of, you know, just writing stuff down, you know, bar counting and stuff. It was you know, the old way really. I mean, you know, I think if you're a band, you know, it's not hard to play the song from start to finish, is it? But if you're songwriting in the studio, you need to kind of write stuff down.
Yeah.
You can't just make a bit that big in Pro Tools and then make a bit that big. And I will always use the same mic for an entire album, you know, and so this album now is C800 pretty much. Vocals, I don't mean everything else, I just mean vocals. So yeah, this album now is C800, but I've had a bit of a kind of, because the Brauner I think's more, it's a lot more, or a bit more accurate I think than anything I've heard. It kind of tends to represent what's actually there. But we've got the Manly Gold as well, stereo, but we use that on the piano. Yeah, and so yeah, just and I've also got a tubed 87 as well. You know, the inner tube mod, where you just basically just take everything out of the 87 and replace it with a tube. It's amazing. Yeah, it's Inner Tube, who do the Squeeze Box, which is really nice. They're kind of just a really small company in California, I think. But they do this. You don't have to take that off, do you? It's an 87 with a tube. I've mixed every song of the Streets myself. Used to do it in Logic, and we now do the mastering as well. So it's kind of everything that you hear on the Streets album was done in here. And what I like about doing the mastering is that we master. It's a little bit time consuming, but we master in the mix, if you like. So we've kind of spent many hours deciding on our master chain that we like the best. We kind of tend to start with it out, out of the insert, but then at a point we just insert the mastering chain in, and mix into the mastering, if you like. The Audio Cube system is basically Wavelab, so I have the entire album loaded up into Wavelab, so you can A/B it while you mix, and it's actually, it kind of sounds quite time consuming, but actually you end up with a really even sound that isn't hyped by EQ, because you've not tried to like brighten up this track to. So there's in terms of kind of like distortion, there's very low distortion in that way of working, because you're not using EQ to compensate at all. You're using EQ as a very delicate effect. It's completely fluid. A producer's role can be anything. I know a lot of people in bands as well, and that's kind of not changed in the slightest. And we had no experience of that really, until we got to know bands really, because it's just not changed, has it? It's still, there's an engineer, there's a producer, and there's a band and a room, and you can't really. They've not bettered that really. So in that realm, I guess you would say a producer is that guy, who creatively administrates the process. But the world that I come from, dance and maybe a little bit hip hop as well, is the producer makes the music. The producer is the guy who is the writer, and and then with hip hop you'd have a rapper who would vocalize that, and maybe a songwriter or something. But so we kind of come from the world where, as a producer, you are everything. You're the songwriter and even the player a lot of the time, if you can't afford to get players. The way that we work, and I'm sure a lot of people work really, is you mix as you go along. The mix starts with the bass drum, and the snare drum. It's like you mix that, and then you record something else, and there's not this kind of like mix thing that's done at the end. It's like in the same way as in the box really, you're mixing all the time. And so I wouldn't want to lose a load of channels to record through. I don't like having any more than one sound on every fader. So in general, no. All of these, apart from the vocals, which are a stereo bus, they're the exception. But everything else is that's a keyboard, that's a piano, that's maybe guitars. We do a bit of that, maybe stereo guitars, but often it will just be the left guitar and the right guitar, two separate, and then panned on the desk. I don't like summing stuff, but then on the delay returns, that's pure summing. You know, that'll be whatever's left over often, and then of course we use the Chandler a bit as well. But I again, you know, the music's very minimal. The music that I make, and 24 is probably. I mean, like if this had 32 channels, I honestly don't think I would need any more. Famous last words. You know, it was very, very important to me that I had a room that was, you know, completely dead. You know, for vocals. So that room is the best recording space I've ever had, and it's amazing. The vocals are completely kind of American, dead. You know. And I love it, you know. And again, you know, if we're recording, I mean, even if you're recording guitars, I don't really mind. I've never minded where a guitar's been recorded, really, and the room always just gives it a bit of character, really. And it's, but I've always been obsessed with getting the deadest vocal sound possible. So that room, we took a lot of time over that. And in here, you know, we I don't know, we might get obsessed again about it, but some of those mix rooms, I find them a bit weird to mix in, because it always feels like the sound's kind of inside my head, you know, and I can't really get with it. You know, if that's what you're used to, then fair enough, but I've always mixed in like bedrooms and living rooms and stuff. You know, I know this room, I know these speakers. I mean, we got the Grados as well, and they're fantastic. You know, I mean, I got a bit too into these for a while actually, and the mixes ended up sounding a bit kind of clunky and kind of and just, you know, I think if you're actually moving air, what you tend to do with your drums is more subtle, really. You know, because when a kick drum is actually moving the air, you know, it suddenly starts to feel a bit aggressive if that kick drum's too loud. But so these are amazing for like EQing stuff, but if you do a whole mix on these, you'll end up your percussives will, you know, stand out a bit much, I find. I've never really been into loud mixing. I think it just comes from living in flats and stuff, you know. I've got no experience of really, or not any thorough experience of mixing in big studios. But even when we're in a big studio, I always tell the engineer to turn it down, you know.
Flattering, isn't it?
Yeah, it's flattering. Yeah.
Sound great.
Yeah, and then you get it at home, and it's like doesn't sound the same as it did on that huge Lockwood, you know, tannery thing, you know.